Welcome to the Fear and Greed Business News Afternoon Report for Monday, the 22nd of July, 2024. I'm Sean Elmer. Every afternoon, we've got the 5 stories that happened today that you need to know about. Story number 1, equity markets in the region dropped after Joe Biden announced he won't run for president in the US election. That was about 4:30am Australian time. His vice president, Kamala Harris, is now hot favourite to replace him, though it's not assured. Most Democrat politicians and heavyweights, people like Bill and Hillary Clinton, have come out in support of her. One who hasn't, interestingly enough, is Barack Obama. The news sent the S&P ASX 200 down 1% before it closed off 0.5%. Energy stocks fell most, followed by materials, real estate investment trusts and telcos. Among the large caps, the banks were flat or lower. Goodman Group dropped more than 2%, while REA and QBE were off 1%. The retailers were strong performers, led by Coles, Woolies and Wesfarmers. Insignia Financial's share price jumped 5% after it said it expects higher than forecast earnings, and Iress' share price closed up 9% on stronger earnings guidance. Story number 2, in commodity markets, iron ore prices are lower, heading towards $100 a tonne. Inventory levels at Chinese ports have risen and are higher than the last couple of years. Also, Chinese steel production is off to a weak start this month, and shipments from key markets such as Australia and Brazil are up this year. In short, higher supply, lower demand puts downward pressure on prices. Then there's copper. Copper is considered the benchmark commodity, reflecting how global growth is going. Last week, copper had its worst 5 days since 2022, down 5%. It peaked back in May, but since then, demand from China has disappointed, and last week's third plenum in Beijing did little to stimulate the world's second largest economy. That sent copper lower, and other metals like aluminium, tin and nickel also fell. Having said all that, on a historical basis, copper prices remain pretty high. Story number 3, South32 share price tumbled 13% today after it warned about the viability of its Worsley alumina refinery, blaming the Western Australian government's strict approach to environmental approvals. The diversified miner announced a $554 million impairment, and it isn't happy with the West Australian government. It said for 5 years, South32 has been working on environmental approvals for the refinery, saying it had undertaken extensive environmental assessment and consultation with a range of stakeholders. Then 2 weeks ago, the state's Environmental Protection Agency said the proposal could go ahead subject to conditions. Now, South32 says several of those conditions go beyond what's reasonable. Otherwise, South32's quarterly production was broadly in line with expectations, with higher volumes across the business. Story number 4, Virgin Australia will axe all flights from Cairns to Haneda just 1 year after the launch of the route, citing poor inbound tourism. The route will cease in February 2025 because there are still 30% fewer inbound tourists from Japan to Australia than pre-COVID. Keep in mind how weak the yen is, and no doubt that's hurting Australia, at least in terms of Japanese tourists. Virgin's fleet of 737 MAX 8s will be redeployed to the carrier's domestic routes. It's the latest route to Asia to be scrapped in recent months following Qantas's exit from mainland China. That takes effect next week. And story number 5, CrowdStrike's Australian customers have foregone their rights to pursue compensation for Friday's global outage in the Australian courts, according to one of the nation's top law firms. A botched software upgrade is expected to cost businesses billions of dollars globally, with estimates in New South Wales alone topping $200 million after big banks, hospitals, retailers and airlines were faced with what is known as the blue screen of death. James North, Head of Technology, Media and Communications at Cause Chambers Westgarth, told The Australian that extracting compensation for losses would be difficult. He said many of CrowdStrike's customers must agree to New York governing law and arbitration in Singapore, foregoing access to Australian courts in the pursuit of legal remedies. CrowdStrike earned more than $2 billion from companies globally last year, according to Gartner. It's the second biggest provider of what's known as endpoint protection. In Australia, it earned more than $111 million from companies last year. That's it for the afternoon report for Monday, the 22nd of July, 2024. Michael Thompson and I will be back tomorrow morning with the Tuesday edition of Fear and Greed Business News. I'm Sean Elmer. Enjoy your evening.